I'm really delighted to be talking to you. I think this is a wonderful meeting. I think we've been doing this this meeting for, I guess this is the 12th year now, is that right? 12th year, and it's bringing together expertise, and that's great. Disruptions, it's sort of corny. If you go to a pretentious business school talk, you know, there'll be a bit at the front about disruptions. So I'll do a little pretentious, the characteristic pretentious bit, and then I shall move on. So what will I talk about? I'll talk about disruptions. I'll talk about predictions and surprises. A bane of my life, and probably yours, is people wandering up to you, clutching an iPad or something and saying, "Isn't this amazing? Aren't you surprised?" And I think it's quite useful to think systematically about what stuff did we know was coming, which isn't really that surprising, and what stuff actually is a surprise. Because I think there have been some big surprises, and I think it's an interesting question for us as we use computers and communication technology to enhance our students' learning experience and to enhance our research activity, is try to be sort of clear. What are we fairly sure is going to happen the next 2, 3, 5 years, and what sort of things really were surprises, because that might give us an idea. And, one thing I wanted to wave at you, I don't know, who else has got a copy of Ted Nelson's Computer Lib and a Dream Machine? Well done. This is a fabulous book. This is a mid-70s, it's sort of countercultural, it's got comics in it, and it's a very jaunty style of writing, but all sorts of things that people write about in the Financial Times or the New Scientist as if they were a sudden surprise are confidently depicted in Ted's book. And there are various texts of prediction about what is going to happen with technology. For my money, this is the absolute best one, and I find it comforting to have in my office because each year that passes, Ted's predictions become more true. So I'll refer to some of those. But there are some surprises too. I mean, and I think the single big surprise has to be the social use of computers. People did not see Facebook coming, they did not see Twitter coming, and we should talk about that. I'll talk a little bit about the characteristics of information and communication technology and how they relate to the university. I'll focus on the student learning experience rather than the research experience. Also, the research experience is very important. I'm just back yesterday from Stockholm, where I was at the most amazing ceremony I've ever been to in my life, where Peter Higgs got the Nobel Prize. But I was intrigued. I went to the physics Nobel lectures, but I was intrigued by the chemistry lectures, because the chemistry lectures all looked like things I'd be interested in. And they were. So there were 3 chemistry laureates, all were computer scientists. And they all had used computational methods to understand basically complicated molecules, or we might think of it as essentially biological processes. And I went up to the Stanford one and said, gosh, you know, how wonderful that I understood a chemistry Nobel lecture. And he said, well, there's no problem, because I'm a computer scientist and you're a computer scientist. But it's very, quite, you know, if you go a few years back, the idea that the 3 people who won chemistry Nobels would all essentially give computer science talks to justify what they were doing and explain the types of 3D modeling they were doing and the types of computational reasoning they were doing. So it is important in science, but I will stick to education. I'll talk about some opportunities, some challenges, and some implications. And I will try. I started 10 minutes late, so I'll run a bit long, and I like questions, so I will try to provide a bit of time for questions. Disruption. So this is the pretentious bit. If you open a business school, or go to a business school lecture, they may say, oh, you know, the big disruption was fire. You know, the world changed when people started using fire, or it was tillage, or there they were all using nouns, and all of a sudden these people started using verbs. And gosh, that was such a disruption, because you could move from describing objects to describing actions. But machines, you know, clearly, while it is a cliche, machines, the invention of machines meant you suddenly could lift things that were heavier than yourself, go faster than a human could run. So that was an important change. Engines, things powered by things like steam, and particularly engines powered by electricity is very important. And the tellies, the telegraph, the television, the telephone. And I was at lunch with the British ambassador to Sweden. 2 days ago with Peter Higgs. And that was, if you were an ambassador, the point at which your job was totally disrupted was the invention of the telegraph. 1 minute you were the important person, you were negotiating with the US president, you would write a letter, and a couple of weeks later, or longer, you would get your instructions from London, and then all of a sudden, the Prime Minister could address the President instantly. So telegraph, for world politics, the telegraph was an enormous disruption. It changed the jobs, it changed the ways things went on. And obviously, we know the ways that television, telephone, and computers are clearly. For me, a very important parallel is, a physical machine allows one to manipulate objects bigger than one and heavier than oneself. And a computer allows one to think about things that couldn't fit into your head. And one of my favourite ways of thinking about a computer is a memory prosthetic. So a computer is an amplifier of our cognitive functions, exactly in the same way as a physical machine is. So disruptions are important, and there are being some. And I guess an interesting question is, are MOOCs the disruption? If you look at the as it were, the writing and the prophecy, something you ought to be thinking about today is, are MOOCs going to change things dramatically in universities, or are they not? And of course, if you look at universities, look at the big surprise. You went from writing to printing. Do people still give lectures in universities? Yes, they do. But we've been printing books now for a few hundred years. And people, so you might have imagined the book would be this very disruptive technology. Do people still go to universities rather than use correspondence, text, and TV? When the Open University was, and the Open University mostly, other people stole the credit. Harold Wilson actually came up with the idea of the Open University. The Open University was seen as a remote television university. The computer wasn't part of the original concept at all. And the question was, and people were divided about the Open University 40 years ago. One point of view, which included Ian MacLeod, said it was a blithering nonsense, it could not possibly work. The other point of view was that it would work, and in so doing destroy the university sector. And what the amazing thing about the Open University is it uses correspondence text, it has good quality assurance, it uses television, it's got about 250,000 learners, it's very successful. Has it disrupted the university sector? If you were a Martian, would you say, oh my gosh, all the wee local universities in Britain were destroyed by the existence of the Open University? Of course not. So things you can get quite large changes, and the success of distance education, and the Open University is a small one now. The Chinese Television University is up to about 5 million learners. The Indira Gandhi National Open University. So we have these big technology-based, and it's essentially not the technology that you lot are interested in. It's the older television and correspondence technology. So disruptions. What were the major predictions? The major prediction has to be Moore's law. Here's a valve. Don't we love them? Here's a valve. Here's some cufflinks with about, 1 billion times the memory that's on the valve. These are my special cufflinks for wearing for gigs like this. So Moore, obviously, he was the guy who essentially came up with the notion that you could print computers. He understood transistor technology, and he made this prediction. Very famous prediction that the cost would halve or the power would double about every 18 months. And that has been a very important prediction. It's still with us. And you all ought to know Moore's law if you don't know Moore's law. And the interesting thing about Moore's law is it looks like it's got at least another 8 years. Even before you go into quantum computing, we've got about another 8 years of Moore's law. Who knows about Metcalfe's law? So Bob Metcalfe was as important in our history as Moore. Bob Metcalfe came up with packet switching. You can claim, there are various claims about where did the internet come from, including actually the National Physical Laboratory did packet switching first. We did packet switching first in this country down the telephone lines. Then obviously it was developed for the ARPANET. And Bob Metcalfe looked at the way that traffic was going, and he confidently predicted that the internet would fall over in about 2001. He said, if you look at these people, and this was him looking in the mid-90s, said these people are doing crazy things. They're sending pictures. Some of them are even sending small animations. They're sending these big data files. The internet will fall over if they keep sending these crazy large files. And Metcalfe's law, which was, a priori about as convincing as Moore's law, it's not true. So that's that. But Metcalfe's law was very important. And then Bayes' law. And of course, in Edinburgh, we take tremendous pride in Thomas Bayes. Why does big data matter? Because big data matters because you can do probabilistic reasoning with tremendous confidence. Thomas Bayes, obviously an Edinburgh lad, studied divinity and logic, 18th century clergyman here, motivated by a desire to do better at gambling. He was a bit like, he was a sort of the Higgs of his time. It took about 150 years before anybody else figured out what Bayes was on about. And it was only at the beginning of the 20th century that actuaries started using Bayes' law with any confidence. And there were some lawsuits then by people saying, no, you can't do this because you're just guessing. Bayes' law is just guessing. But in this room a couple of years ago, I opened the World Conference in Machine Learning. That's my background. I was a symbolic machine learning person. Every single paper in the conference was statistical machine learning. They were successful, and they were all using Bayes' law. And I gave a lecture at the Google HQ, and I lectured them very sternly. I said they should all be wearing T-shirts saying Google powered by Bayes, because Google and Google Translate would not work without Bayes' law. So Bayes' law, very important, and as we get larger data sets, will become even more important. And one of my personal aspirations, given my own background, is for Bayes to be treated as important as Higgs, as important as Maxwell, because he is. Semantic networks, very confidently predicted. Vannevar Bush talked about semantic networks in 1945. So when people say to you, are you surprised by Google? Well, 1945, Vannevar Bush was talking about semantic networks. In the mid-1960s at this university, people were using look at Machine Intelligence 1, and you'll find depth-first search and breadth-first search written about 1964. So is Google surprising? Not in the slightest. Google is in here. Google is in US documents of the late 40s, early 50s. That capability. Not a surprise. The cloud. Anybody know when the cloud was predicted, described? Anybody want to give me a date for the cloud? I'll give you a clue. Stanford. Very famous Stanford computer scientist. John McCarthy described the cloud in 1968. Very nice paper, entitled Software as a Service. So a major prediction turned out to be true. So when people say, oh, isn't the cloud amazing? I say, it took a bit of time. We all knew it was coming. Didn't know it would take them quite so long to get it working reliably. Intelligent tutors. My PhD is on using machine learning in intelligent tutors. Richard Smallwood's 1962 MIT PhD thesis is the first one that I know which describes an actual operational intelligent tutor. And then machine learning. So these are major predictions. Minor predictions, personal portable. This is, for about 25 years I was a consultant at the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. What does this look like? I'll ask somebody in the audience. What does that look like? It looks like an iPad. It's a mock-up of an iPad. When was this document produced? 1976. So is the iPad a surprise? Of course not. Alan Kay and all, we knew the iPad was coming. Again, it took a bit longer than we expected. But not a surprise. ICT integration. People will be talking about the iPhone for ages. Robots, here, this one visited Edinburgh, Asimo, 2/3 model of a person. How old are robots? In terms of descriptions, at least 2,000 years old. The Japanese, the Chinese, the Greeks, they were all interested in automata and what they might do. Video phone, not a surprise. You read a piece of Between the Wars science fiction, you'll have people chatting to each other on video phones. Personalised instruction, not a surprise. A lot of what we do in using e-learning now is actually based on cybernetic ideas, the ideas of feedback and such. These, again, are not new. The most important exemplar was Gordon Pask. I invited him up to Edinburgh to give a lecture in 1974. Most of the people, some of whom still work in this building at the time, were deeply sceptical, the artificial intelligence people, but the cybernetic ideas have taken root. And speech recognition, not new. So what are the big surprises? I want you all to shut your eyes for a moment and think of a big surprise, and then we'll see if it's on my list. For me, the biggest surprise has to be that Moore's law is still true. I mean, Moore's law was true when I was a researcher. It's still true. Metcalfe's law is still untrue. And there is just so much more redundancy. And I guess what Metcalfe got it wrong. The the ARPANET was designed to be highly redundant. It was designed for the US to survive a nuclear strike. So it is. But there is so much more redundancy in the system. And of course, Moore's law applies to things like the servers. It applies to the routers. It seems to be applying to the bandwidth. So Metcalfe's law is still false, but for some people that is still a surprise. Facebook and Twitter are real surprises, and I think they're really worth thinking about. People, I'm somebody who's got all the literature in my office. You won't find Facebook or Twitter there. Google Translate, the folks here, the folks elsewhere, you try to do your translation using rules. The idea that you could use Bayes' law and the Rosetta Stone method to do translation, that's a big surprise. Very, very personal computing. And then a big, big surprise is the Netscape business model. Mark Andreessen got some venture capital money to do interactive television. Couldn't figure out how to do it. Learned about the World Wide Web, and he produced the company Netscape that produced the first browser. Mark did not know what a business model, so he said, well, gosh, we've got to move, so we'll just give it away free and we'll figure out the business model later. The plan was not any more elaborate than that. The Netscape business model, of course, has been adopted. It's the Facebook business model. It's the MOOC business model. It's the Wikipedia business model. But that was a big surprise. And there are people in our business school and business schools around the world who are still banging their head against the wall saying, what the hell sort of business model is it that you build something very complicated and then you give it to everybody for free? But that business model is a big surprise. And I think if one's looking at where... cognate areas, where might the new surprises come? Well, social computing and in business models. Small surprises, the World Wide Web. It's not, you could perfectly possible to work out at the time Tim Berners-Lee did it, that you could do it. And things like it, in terms of remote use of servers, was being done. But I have paid my respects to the first computer, which is at CERN, on which the World Wide Web was mounted. And certainly, World Wide Web, of course, why was the World Wide Web invented? It was invented so that physicists in Switzerland did not have to get up at night to listen to people, to physicists in the US or Japan asking what sort of header do I need in order to suck this new particle physics data. That's what it was designed for. Whatever Tim Berners-Lee imagined it was going to be used for, he didn't imagine it was going to be used for what we now use it. I think the extent of third world take-up, the amount of leapfrogging going into countries which have not gone through the evolutionary telegraph, telephone, television, computing stages that we have, but are charging in. Which country in the world is most advanced in one laptop per child? Which country has actually implemented one laptop per child as predicted by Nick Negroponte? Anybody know? No, Uruguay. They have done it, and they really have. Now, Uruguay did not have the infrastructure, and the way they did it, and this is an interesting issue for us, the way they did it in Uruguay was by ignoring the teachers, by ignoring the Ministry of Education, by getting 250 bright young Uruguayans who knew all about the technology and going straight from a centralized support service to a situation now where every school child in Uruguay has a powerful personal computer, and which they're using for a whole range of things. So that's sort of leapfrogging. In 1 minute, Uruguay would have to be, there's France, there's the UK, there's the US, and there's Uruguay ranked wherever in the world list of technology in schools, and then suddenly Uruguay is number one. Bang, just like that. So leapfrogging. We have face recognition now. We have speech recognition now. Anybody know how old the mouse is? Mouse, first demonstration of?
1968.
Exactly. Fall Joint Computing Conference done at SRI, 1968. They also had windows, except they didn't put frames around the windows, but active screen areas. So a little bit of a surprise, but not a dramatic surprise, because one of the big influences on computer graphics was things like the military applications. Reliability, things are much more reliable certainly than I would have predicted. And around the world, there are at least 500 MOOCs at the moment, and there are at least 7 million people who started with them. And that is a surprise. The speed, the idea of MOOC is not new. Open Educational Resources Distance Model, not at all new. But the speed with which the MOOCs are going is quite extraordinary. What's important about ICT? It's a memory prosthetic. It really is pointless to remember things, all sorts of things. Much simpler just to know how to look it up. It's ubiquitous. Reverse time travel. I mean, and I'm pleased to see David Dewhurst here. David's team won a Queen's Anniversary Prize for how they use technology in the vet school, and one of the things that really struck me about that work was a vet student has an electronic portfolio and can say, oh my gosh, that puppy or that image of a puppy that I saw in year 3 with the paw, I want to see that paw again. So reverse time travel, very nice feature. Distributed, highly redundant. The very great redundancy in ICT is very important. Very cheap. And anybody know which garage this is? Garage startups? Apple. No, it's a much more important garage than Apple. Apple is just... the folks at Apple were just copying these folks. Okay. No, this is the Ur garage. Anybody in here? You know, as it were, the first time a garage was used for serious technology development. So much older than Apple. This is Hewlett and Packard's garage, where they created. And of course, Hewlett and Packard's garage relates to the move from these boys to my cufflinks, you know, from valves to transistors. But the point about the garage is unusually the entry costs. I mean, of Skype, fabulous business. 2 lads in an internet cafe in Estonia set Skype up, which is obviously slightly more comfortable than a garage. But it is, and if you've got shares in Facebook or Google or anything, be worried. Remember Bebo. Look at the garages. A couple of lads, maybe not in Estonia, maybe they're in Kazakhstan, can go into a garage or an internet cafe. So the entry costs, and Facebook is a classic example, did not require much upfront resource to enter into Facebook. What are the educational opportunities? Open educational resources. When I was Master of Birkbeck dominated the postgraduate education in crystallography, and it did that online postgraduate. So it had fabulous online courses, had wonderful three-dimensional software. It used Rasmol. Now Rasmol is maintained by the US researchers. So Birkbeck, just as we don't pay anything to maintain the Coursera platform, but our MOOCs are currently running on a Coursera platform, but you can get fabulous 3D molecular modeling capability, and it's free. All you need to do is A, tell the students the web address, and B, give them some modeling activities to do with it. So I think open educational resources will become more and more important. Ability to use multiple languages. For me, one of the most fascinating things about MOOCs is people themselves saying, oh, this is good fun, but it would be nicer if it was in Catalonian, so let's just use Google Translate and do our own Catalonian version of this MOOC. And a nice surprise is the way that minority languages, like Quebecois, the French that they speak in Canada, are suddenly getting this boost from the technology. And likewise, Celtic and Scottish studies. You know, we have a wonderful partnership from here with Sorna Ostig, and the key thing that is being used is to use the technology to commute with Gaelic-speaking wannabes in Canada and New Zealand. So language is a tremendous opportunity. Visualization, you know, again, if you one of the striking things about these 3 Nobel lectures in chemistry that I went to on Monday is they all had incredibly beautiful computer-generated graphics showing you these fabulous proteins, and not just showing you these proteins, but showing you these movies of proteins and enzymes, movies of simulated enzymes gobbling up simulated proteins in glorious 3-dimensional Technicolor. Visualization, very, very important opportunity. Wisdom of crowds. Our astrobiology MOOC, Charlie Cockrell's lovely MOOC, continues. And groups of people who studied it are still organized in groups, and they can go and they can pull down the galaxy data. And you've got all these, tremendous, particularly in astronomy, in plant taxonomy now, there are these fabulous movements around the world. Citizen science is one of the jargons for it. But, people are discovering new spiral nebulae who are not professional astronomers, but working together as a group. Using the data. So wisdom of crowds is important. Big data, very important. Obviously this university, tremendous leadership position. We've been running the high-performance computers for the UK for the last 12 years, and massively important in health, in social data, clearly in physics data, clearly in genetic data. So tremendous opportunities there. Fast feedback, clearly it's possible. And one of the slogans I very much like is George Birkbeck's fabulous 1823 slogan. What do we want? We want universal access to the blessings of knowledge. I think a great positive surprise about our 6 MOOCs was, we were surprised by how it built the university's reputation. We were surprised by a nice relationship with our online postgraduate courses, but the big surprise for me was the way it worked for access. And I think this whole notion that there are people all around the world who can access Harvard business folks or Edinburgh astrobiologists or philosophers. Our philosophy MOOC, wonderful example of access. So there are some tremendous educational opportunities. What are the challenges? The challenges are, and this is where Jeff looks totally confident, and the colleagues who work with Jeff. Reliability, is that a problem for us here? Of course not. But it does everything. I used to be the representative of artificial intelligence for computer use in the mid-70s, and I used to go and bang the table at the Edinburgh Regional Computing Centre every time a bus went past Forest Hill. All our network connections went down. Things like that. These are just, now as the chair of the JISC, gosh, you lose St Mary's Twickenham for 5 minutes on a Saturday, but nobody notices. Janet, extraordinarily, the reliability figures on Janet are prodigious. But clearly reliability matters. People are used to, and gosh, don't you get havoc if a university's email goes down, or if a university's servers goes down. It does not take the professors and the students very long to get agitated. So reliability matters. Security becoming more and more of an issue. Who's using our systems for what purposes? I was at a reception for the Royal Bank of Scotland, and I talked to the person who's probably got the most demanding job there. She's head of cyber security. Massive issue for all the banks. How do we make this stuff secure? Secure against people who can write computer programs that multiply very, very large prime numbers and send trials, but also secure against people who wander past other people and could dive into the waste paper basket and fish out passwords. Big issue. Security. Platform sustainability. Any particular platform, will it be here 10 years from now? The most confident prediction has to be no. For anything that we're familiar with, just because Facebook or Google look secure there, or Wikipedia. If you go run your mind back any number of years. So platform sustainability, the secure position, and I think Jeff and his colleagues have been brilliant at this, is designed for multiple platforms, designed for platform independence. Planned obsolescence. Are computer and software manufacturers wicked people who hope to sell you another one 3 or 4 years from now? Because it's better, and B, because the current one you're using has mysteriously stopped working. That must have been an accident, mustn't it? That's as the new version of the operating system comes out, the old version stops working properly. For us, big challenge in a university, inquirer to alumnus. We would really like one integrated system that dealt with the random inquirer and dealt with the 90-year-old alumnus. And yet, people pop up, and notice my nice picture of silos. Even in a university as collegiate and as wonderful as we are, there are silos. And what do we have to do with those silos? We have to knock them down. In the long game, it cannot be the case that registry or development and alumni or physics and astronomy or the vets or anybody have a silo which is their own. In the long run, if the university as a whole and the inquirers to the alumnus are all to get the benefit, we have got to get rid of the silos. But it's very, very hard. People are in a hurry and the technology is cheap to buy. Appropriate assessment. And of all the educational challenges, and I've been saying this for years, but the biggest challenge still is appropriate assessment. And I would encourage you, particularly if you've got PhD students working in this area or young colleagues, the big place for opportunity, the place to get famous is in assessment, to be innovative in assessment. Because the current types of assessment we're using were old-fashioned 30 or 40 years ago in a conventional university. Delivered through technology, they're just stupid. A lot of the things we do are just stupid. They're inappropriate for a learner who's used to using a computer all the time, who's used to using Google and Wikipedia, who's used to working electronically in physically distributed groups. So the place to make your name, I encourage you, if you're not sure what to do next, do an innovation and assessment. And if it works, then you'll have done something that really matters. What are the implications? MIT and Stanford are going to be fine. They are for universities, clearly. And they're playing a very complicated game. They're the world leaders, brand leaders in universities, and yet they're also the world leaders in the MOOCs, which doesn't make their alumni that cheery, but they will be fine. Manchester Metropolitan will be fine. Because a big university where most of the students get to it via public transport and teaches stuff with lots of that has lots of skill-based, that university is going to be fine. What universities are not going to be fine, and I asked Nicola to try to find me, I wanted a squeezed ketchup bottle. It's the squeezed middle. There is no better university to be the head of than Edinburgh, so I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But if I was a younger person, if I imagine me 20 years younger, knowing what I know about the technology, would I go and run MIT? Of course I would. Would I go and run Manchester Met? I'd seriously think about it. Would I run a small university with a bit of research, sitting in a nice field somewhere? No, I wouldn't. I would really worry about whether that place is going to be still here 10 or 20 years ago. So there is going to be a squeezed middle. But is the top 100 okay? I think so. Edinburgh's top 20, so we're comfy, cosy. But there'll be university. No, Jeff's worried. He'd like to be top 10. Which 17 is not bad, Jeff. But it's clear that if you are a world top 20 university, you've got a brand, people will come to you. If you're a university where nearly everybody comes to you via public transport, you're okay. Because you're serving a local need and that works. If you're a university where you're asking people to spend a lot of money to stay in things that look like cheap hotels, to study with you with academics who are not the most famous academics in the area on the planet, well, you could stay at home and watch the Harvard professors. It's a bit cheaper, and the professors are classier. So, student mobility, there will be student mobility. We have got to respond to it positively. Pick and mix. I do like the graphic of pick and mix. And credit accumulation. We have got to be prepared for the student who... New York Times wrote a fabulous thing about MOOCs. It said, in the future, this was an editorial, in the future, students will go to Harvard for their business. They will go to Edinburgh, to MIT for their engineering. They will go to Stanford for their computer science. Guess what they thought the single most important part of the Edinburgh brand was? I'll give you a clue. It's not medicine. But if you know the detail of the QS ranking, this will not surprise you. What did they, sitting there in New York, imagine that people from around the world would come to us for? Which subject above all? Any guesses?
Geology.
Huh?
Geology.
Geology is pretty high, and of course we invented geology with Hutton, but no. I'll give you a clue. It's another subject that was invented in the university, but it is not geology. Literature, yeah, because we're world number one for linguistics and literature. We've got our living saints of Joe Rowling, Ian Rankin, Philippa Gregory, Sandy McCall-Smith. And we've got our dead saints, Walter Scott, Thomas Carlyle. So we're clear, but a very interesting model in that New York Times editorial of, well, you just go to the best university, so New York Times perceived us as the best university in the world for literature. And actually, if you look at some of the citation data, certainly for linguistics, that's not a bad claim. And with Blair, of course, who rebadged his chair into Belles Lettres in the mid-18th century, like geology, we can claim that that's one of the subjects this university made up. So, what are our assets in the University of Edinburgh? The building we're in, we have, Cambridge is 2, and Manchester is 3, and we have more top-rated computer scientists in this building than those two universities combined. So we're in charge of computer science in Europe, and that's handy. We have been in charge of high-performance computing in the UK, and we've won the competition 3 times in a row, so that's handy. In addition to David's Queen's Prize, we have won the Regius Professor of Surgery. That sounds like an establishment figure. The Regius Professor of Surgery, James Garden, his team has just won the Queen's Anniversary Prize 2 weeks ago for ESSQ, teaching surgery electronically at a distance. So we've won 2 Queen's Prizes, both for e-learning, both in slightly surprising areas. One in the first case with the vets, in the second case with the remote teaching of surgery. But those are great assets. If anybody says, is Edinburgh a university that can use e-learning? Well, we can teach people about sick puppies, and we can teach people how to use laser surgery at a distance. So we ought to. EDINA, very, very important. Institute of Academic Development, our 4 global academies. A bit of a surprise is the way our 4 wonderful global academies have become places, routes through which our online postgraduate courses are going. And then we have fabulous MOOC momentum, and all credit. I was in Stanford, as it were, the day in 2012, the first serious MOOC coverage started appearing in the newspapers after they got 160,000 on Sebastian Thrum's search technology MOOC from Stanford. I started sending Jeff annoying emails. Jeff started sending me annoying emails. We went backwards and forwards. By September, we were planning, and by January, we had our 6 MOOCs. And we've got, and we are clearly seen by not just UK government ministers, but by European government ministers. We are currently the European, clearly not the world leader. Clearly, MIT now in alliance with Harvard, and clearly Sebastian, and clearly Stanford with its different links to the world leader. But we have got massive MOOC momentum, and we can build. So we've got tremendous assets. What's been happening? I just thought I would look at what's been happening over the last 10 years. The number of e-journals has gone up by that we've got in the university has gone up by a factor of 10. But look at the e-books. It's gone up by a factor of 1,000. We have 1,000 times more e-books. So e-books is clearly something to look at. We've gone from 1 million e-journal article downloads to 5 million. So it's not that dramatic. It's a factor, but still dramatic. But if you look at e-book section downloads, then it is, again, we are talking in the thousands, tens of thousands. One of the interesting things here is people said, one of those things that e-learning and e-journals and e-books will do is that they will destroy the need for the library. We've got our beautifully refurbished and heartbreakingly expensive library. And I noticed the coy smiles on some of the relevant colleagues' face. But what has happened with our library use in this period with massive increase in electronic? Our physical use of the library has almost doubled. Right? Our student numbers haven't doubled, but our physical use of the library has almost doubled. So whatever else is happening is we're not using the physical library less. In terms of ownership, 10 years ago, 3/4 of the students coming to us had a computer or had used a computer. So that's not a dramatic change, but it's a very important change, because now 100%, no student comes to the University of Edinburgh who is not used to personal computing. 99% of them bring them with them, and the other 1% presumably just wander down the corridor and use somebody else's computer, or haven't actually realised that their iPhone is a computer, should be badged as a computer. So that's nice changes. So what are the implications for us? Many more MOOCs, which is what, with Jeff's great leadership, we're doing. More online masters. There are So I'll do this to not sound too rude. In my part of Ireland, there are two types of shays. There are crafty shays who captured land and moved on, and there are stupid shays. And I'm a stupid shay. You know, we lost out in successive land divides. In the University of Edinburgh, there are two sorts of schools. There are clever schools and there are stupid schools. How can you tell the difference between a clever school and a stupid school? It's not too difficult. A clever school is experimenting with MOOCs. A clever school has got at least one online master's of reasonable scope. A stupid school has not yet done a MOOC experiment. A stupid school has not yet designed an online master's. Because if you have an online master's, the Borders Agency can do weird things. You still have access to those students. The currency exchanges can go in weird ways. The students can still connect to you. And you've got a way of doing something which I haven't talked about, which is very interesting, which is there is a tremendous flow from the electronic innovation in the online masters and in the MOOCs to the regular undergraduate program. So when you do something brilliant in a MOOC, like I with Peter Higgs and I started the Higgs boson MOOC, which will be coming out in January. So we'll have a wonderful MOOC on understanding the Higgs boson. That will instantly be, it's part of the undergraduate teaching, bits of it. Not the MOOC qua MOOC, but the interesting technological bits, the interesting visual bits. So when you're working on a MOOC and you're working on it, you're not in some silo, which is the stuff you're using is inevitably going to find its way into the regular teaching program. So we'll see more hybrid undergraduate. We need advanced ICT partners, and this is a difficulty. The world wants to partner with us. Why does the world want to partner with us? Because we are leaders in e-learning and leaders of MOOCs. Do we want to partner with the world? No, we do not. We want to partner with people who know more than us. So for us, the ideal partners are Stanford, who we do have very close relationships with. I spent my last 2 study leaves there in their digital futures, and I'll spend my next study leave there. We want to partner with Delhi, we're partnering with, very appropriate. They have a massive distance learning program. They're experimenting with e-learning. Beda, Peking University, we want to partner with, very, very strongly. But we need to be quite selective, and we need to ask that awful question. When a university comes to Edinburgh and says we want a partner, we have to say what's in it for us, because we are not the technology transfer office for e-learning for the UK or for Scotland. We need to stay in front, and that means we need to be highly selective about our partners. The ideal partner knows more than us, or certainly knows more than us about e-assessment or about OERs or such. So that's quite important. And we need to do radical experiments. I would really encourage you, if you've got some really wacky idea about how groups of students might use computing to learn stuff, try it out. This is the time. And learning analytics is key. And I just signed off earlier this morning. We will be appointing to a chair in learning analytics and recruiting from around the world, and we'll be appointing to a chair in digital education. And our work on digital will span between informatics and Murray House. But we have the opportunity through learning analytics to do tremendous stuff. And new assessment. And I'll finish with this lovely slide. Can you read that one? It's not my... I shall go back to this one. This is I'll just mention what is on. This is a lovely slide due to Matt, somebody or other. Somebody shout his name. Mark. This is a fabulous slide due to Mark Wetton. And you've got an iceberg, and what is on the slide, which I encourage you to Google, and I'm sure Mark will make it available to you, is all the different types of computing our students use. And one of the reasons I think we have been so successful is from the first of these conferences we have engaged with the students and we have listened to them.